The other day I put on a pair of trousers and realized I now needed a belt to keep them up. And not the other way, when it feels as though clothes have been mysteriously shrunken in the wardrobe. And I felt genuinely happy. For me, that was a proof that I was making progress towards my health goals. That gave me that boost for the day. Later, the very same day, I changed into another pair of trousers before heading out for a walk, and they fitted perfectly. No belt required. Why? Had I gained weight during the day? Well, no. The trousers were just a smaller size, so they simply fitted better. And that's when it struck me. If my only measure of progress had been, do I need a belt or not? Well, I would have completely missed that fact that I'm actually moving forward towards my health goals when having these fitted pants. When I'm recording this, it's the beginning of October. And we just step into a final quarter of the year, the home stretch before New Year. And here's the thing. In every company I worked with since university, Q4 has always had its own rhythm, its own intensity. But one employer in particular stands out. It was a well-known fact that from the very 1st of October, you start sprinting. Push, push, push. Full speed ahead until the very end of December. And yes, the energy could be exciting, but it came with a cost. Because when the focus is only on the sprint, the push, the numbers, well, we risk missing the bigger picture. Just like my trousers. If I would only measure, do I need a belt or not? Well, I would have missed the fact that I'm actually moving forward in a more healthier direction and more meaningful way. It's a rather well-known statement that what gets measured gets done. And there's a lot of truth in that. But I would actually rephrase it. What gets followed up on gets done. Because we can measure 100 things, but if no one looks at it again, if no one checks it, reflects on it or adjusts, then it doesn't create any real change. It's the follow-up, the review, the conversation around it that actually builds the momentum. But there is of course a challenge. If we only measure the short-term results, that's all we optimize for. If instead we measure progress towards the bigger vision and the strength we will have to keep going, then we start to build something that lasts. I'm Hannah Saxmy, your leadership coach, and this podcast is your confidence boost in color. Let's go. After summer holidays, when I was working in IT, I started to notice a pattern. Every year, the change requests that came in after the vacation often contradicted the changes we had already implemented before the break. Some could easily be removed, others were deprioritized. But then there were the stubborn ones. Well, not the item as such, the item owners, who could put in enormous effort to explain, to debate, to convince the prioritization board why their request had to be worked on. They simply wouldn't take no for an answer. So I began spending time with them. Why is this so critical? What results do you believe it will bring? And what makes it hard for you to take in other perspectives? After a while, a theme started to emerge. And I would say most of the cases, the persistence wasn't really about the change request of itself. It was about personal goals. Targets agreed with the manager at the start of the year. If those targets weren't met, they would fail, and by that, miss their bonuses. There was a real monetary implication on this one, which meant resources were being pulled towards items that didn't actually move the company towards its goals, instead of reviewing and adjusting the goals themselves. And that made me think. This wasn't about the IT systems or efficiency. It was about how we humans behave when we are measured in a certain way. And I've seen it in myself too. For years, when I set health goals, I measured success by the number on the scale, week after week. Yeah, I hit the number. Twice I lost like 25 to 30 kilos, but I didn't sustain it. As soon as the measure disappeared, as soon as I ticked that box, I slipped back. I hadn't really taken in the long-term perspective on this one. It's the same with those change requests. If the only thing that matters is hitting a target, well, creativity, collaboration and perspective go out of the window. The focus narrows to, I must hit this or I fail. The problem isn't the ambition. The problem is the measurement. And that's why I found this conversation so interesting. I was listening to Simon Sinek, who was interviewing Ben Francis, the founder of Gymshark. He talked about how their decision-making have evolved. In the early days, the focus was on rapid growth, hit the targets, prove yourself. Well, every choice measured against short-term wins. It's like chasing the numbers on the scale. You might get there, but you're not necessarily building something that lasts. Today their perspective is completely different. And he said, like, we're building a company that should exist in 100 years. And when you hold that perspective, your questions, your focus, that will change. Not just, will this help us hit the quarter targets, but does this strengthen us for the long run? Will this still make sense 10 years from now? And that's the difference between measuring for the sprint and measuring for a marathon. So now, this is where the confident framework feels like a proper conversation partner. Let's talk it through together, not as a checklist, but as a prompts that you can try on. If we start with clarity, do we actually know where we are heading? Because if we don't, our measures defaults to what's loud, urgent, or easy to count. With clarity, the milestones become meaningful, not just visible. Then ownership. Who owns the goals? If they're imposed, people chase them for the bonuses. If they're owned, measures connect to the values and purpose. That's when commitment replaces compliance. What about nurture? Are we creating conditions to keep going? Energy, recovery, support. It's not enough to track output. We need to notice whether we're resourced to sustain progress. Focus asks, what truly matters now? If you're measuring everything, nothing stands out. Smart measurement is choosing a few drivers and letting the rest go. And intuition, yes, the data matters, but do we also listen to the signals that don't fit the spreadsheet? The temperature in the room, the gut feel that something might be off. Discipline is the drumbeat in all of this. Not one massive sprint, but steady, consistent behaviors. Are we measuring the rhythm that actually builds performance? With empathy, we remember people. What we measure affects how people feel and show up. Are we paying attention to their experience and growth, not just their output? Next step brings it back to movement. Big vision can be overwhelmed. Did we take the next aligned step? And that's how confidence compounds. And finally, truth. Do your measure reflect who you are and the culture you want to create? If not, they won't be sustainable. Truth keeps us anchored while we grow. So when we look at where you are right now, ask, am I measuring in a way that reflects a confident leadership? If you do, your measures won't just track performance. They guide sustainable growth and real lasting impact. So how do we apply this, especially now when we already are in Q4? I like to look at the measures through 3 lenses. The first one is results. Yes, results matters. Revenue delivery KPIs. They give us something concrete to aim for. But if that's all you measure, then you default to the sprint. At high speed, you risk rushing, ticking boxes, and missing critical new informations along the way. And therefore, I put a lot of emphasis on the second lens, which is routines, which consistent actions actually build capacity over time. Personally, it's the routines that keep me healthy. In the business, it's leadership practices, healthy goal-setting processes, innovation processes. They don't always show up as an immediately return, but they are the engine for the long-term performance. And here's the rub. Almost every organization I have worked with knows that they can't stay as they are and still be relevant tomorrow, which means that innovation and adaptation aren't optional, they're survival. So the routines you establish now must deliver both the Q4 results and also the rest of the year, meaning keep you on the track for the vision. And thirdly, resilience. How strong are we at the very end? Do we still have the energy, creativity, and capability to keep going? It's one thing to hit the quarter's numbers. It's another to finish with a team that is engaged and ready for the next chapter. When you measure across all three, results, routines, and resilience, you get a far more honest picture of the direction. Because yes, what gets measured gets done, but as I said, what's follow-up? That's the importance. The deeper question is, are you measuring only for the sprint or also for the marathon? That's why I keep returning to the vision. Keeps talking about that. Create real clarity on what matters. Involve your team, your whole organization in shaping the milestones along the way. When people understand not just the finish line, but the meaningful steps in between, well, you will build alignment, ownership, and the strength to keep moving together. And one more thought. If you put all your emphasis on a Q4 sprint, what are you really saying? That only Q4 matters? But what about the other 3 quarters? How much more can you achieve if you treated all 4 as part of the same race, not one desperate push at the end? So I guess it's pretty clear where I stand on Q4 sprints. So today, when I measure my health goals, I focus on whether I'm consistent with the routines I've chosen. Because I have envisioned a daily life where I have good habits that are supporting me and makes it simple to feel good. That is part of the clarification I have made for my health goals. I honestly have no idea what my current weight is. Because for me, the health goal is to building habits I can sustain. I'm done with hitting a target weight and then losing it again. I notice how my clothes fits, how strong I feel, how much energy I have. And twice a year I review the routines. Long term, not quick fixes. I apply the same thinking to my business. I am in this for the long run. If I only measure external goals like revenue, growth, market figures, I risk pouring attention into things that I can't fully control. What I can control is what I can do consistently over time. The routines and actions that move me and my company towards the vision. So what about you? As you go into Q4, try these questions. What are you currently measuring? And does it tell the whole story? Which routines could you track instead to strengthen long-term performance? How are you measuring resilience for yourself, for your team, your organization? So you don't just hit the sprint, you sustain the marathon. And you know what? I hold myself to the same principle. My routine is to publish a podcast every week. That's what I measure. I also look at the listeners and returning listeners' feedback on relevance. Before this podcast, I wrote a weekly blog. The feedback received told me it wasn't moving me fully towards the vision, so I adjusted the media. The consistency stayed. The format shifted. Consistency is the real key. And speaking of consistency, when I switch off the microphone and the camera today, I'm heading out for a walk. That's part of the rhythm too. And remember, after Q4, Q starts straight away. There's no pause, which means right now you're ahead of the game. You can already take steps to enter the new year with strength and momentum. If you want clarity for yourself in your own journey, spend half an hour with my free clarity workbook. It will shape your focus for Q4 and as you move into Q1. And if you want to set your organization on a stronger path towards its vision, get in touch. Let's explore what support you need to move forward with clarity and confidence. I work both with leaders individually and with the whole organization to clarify this and to be able to take that next step. You find everything in the show notes, how to get in contact with me, etc. and the clarity workbook. Talk to you soon. Be confident. Be you.
Confidence starts inside of you.